O-Level Biology 5090, Chapter 14, Coordination and Control, Part 1, Mammalian Nervous System. Our nervous system consists of two parts, the central nervous system and the peripheral nervous system. First of all, the central nervous system. Central nervous system consists of two parts, the brain and the spinal cord. Brain is protected by our skull, and spinal cord is protected by our vertebral column. All those functions which are controlled by the brain, they are called as voluntary actions. As for example, reading, writing, and the functions which are controlled by our spinal cord, they are called as involuntary action. Involuntary actions. For example, breathing. The brain is the center of our thoughts, the interpreter of our external environment, and the region of control over body movements. All body movements are controlled by our central nervous system. The brain is the main processing organ of the body. All sensory information about the internal and external environment is brought to the brain, where it is processed. If the action is voluntary, then it will be brought to the brain. Otherwise, it will be sent towards the central nervous system's second part, which is spinal cord. The brain then sends out signals to cause the appropriate response to the body. So the messages are sent from the receptors towards the central nervous system, and from central nervous system towards the effectors. And effectors are muscles or glands. So the next part of the nervous system is peripheral nervous system. So the peripheral nervous system consists of associated nerves which send the messages towards the central nervous system from receptors. The receptors towards the central nervous system, and from central nervous system towards the effectors. So it means different types of nerves are involved to take the messages from receptors to central nervous system and back towards the effectors to bring a response. Peripheral nervous system is that part of our nervous system that lies outside brain and spinal cord. It plays key role in both sending information from different areas. Different area means receptors to your brain or spinal cord, that is central nervous system, as well as carrying out commands from your brain or spinal cord to various parts of the body, that is towards the effectors. So in this way, both parts are involved in coordination among different parts. In the next diagram, you can see the location of central nervous system, that is brain in the skull, and spinal cord in the vertebral column, and from brain and spinal cord, the different nerves which are bringing the messages towards the central nervous system or away from the central nervous system, which is called as peripheral nervous system. Now the unit of nervous system is called as neuron. So the three different types of neurons are there in the body. They are, number one is the sensory neuron. Sensory neuron takes the messages from the receptors towards the central nervous system. They are also called as receptor neuron. neuron, receptor neuron. So if we study its structure, we can have a cell body which has nucleus and cytoplasm. And you can see on the right side of cell body, dendrites are there, which are further divided. And on the left side, you can have axon. The axon is covered by myelin sheath, and myelin sheath is made up of Schwann cells. The axon ends are called as axon terminals. So the direction of messages is towards, that is, this sensory neuron takes the messages from the receptors towards the central nervous system. So they are called as receptor neuron. Now the other type of neuron which is present, which is part of the central nervous system. It is present in the central nervous system. It is called as relay neuron, which connects the sensory neuron with the motor neuron. So it is a connection or a relay which connects the both neurons, sensory neurons and motor neurons. Now, you can see its structure as well. It also consists of a cell body, a nucleus, cytoplasm, dendrite, a axon, and axon terminals. But its size is much smaller as comparison to other neurons. Third type of neuron, which takes the messages from the central nervous system towards the effectors. So here its structure, you can see a large cell body with nucleus and cytoplasm, and cell body is further divided into dendron, and dendron are divided into dendrite. Again, axon, long axon covered with myelin sheath, and nodes of Ranvier are there, which are the gaps between the myelin sheath. So axon terminals are also there. The motor neurons are also called as effector neuron. Next, the messages are sent in the form of nerve impulses. So an action potential is also called as a nerve impulse. It is an electrical charge that travels along the membrane of a neuron. It can be generated when a neuron's membrane potential is changed by chemical signals from a nearby cells. When there is any stimulus in the internal or external environment, at that time, a nerve impulse in the form of electrical charge is generated, which moves along the neuron's membrane. From the sensory neuron, it moves from the uh, sensory neuron, travel through the relay, and then back through the motor neuron. The immediate response to a stimulus. Stimulus is any change. So a response which is very immediate due to a stimulus is called as reflex action. So when our hand or finger touches with an hot object, then messages are sent. So our finger will act as a receptor. It is our sense organ. Touch receptors are there, which will feel the hotness of this burning object or the hot object. Then the message will be sent through the sensory neuron towards the spinal cord, not towards the brain. spinal cord. From spinal cord, the message will be back by motor neuron towards the muscles of our hand, and as a result we will withdraw our hands within fractions of seconds. So it means it is very immediate response which can be brought about only because the message is sent towards the spinal cord, not towards the brain. So this type of reaction is also called as involuntary reaction, and a few neurons, or you can say 2 or 3 neurons, are involved to bring about this type of response. So this is called as reflex action. Next is reflex arc. Reflex arc is actually a pathway which a nerve impulse travels when there is any message which is conveyed towards the central nervous system and towards the effector from central nervous system. A nerve pathway made of sensory neuron, interneuron or relay neuron, and motor neuron. So it controls reflex action. And you can see over there message sent through the sensory neuron, from sensory neuron to the spinal cord, and from the spinal cord towards the muscles. So a nerve pathway is called as reflex arc. Next, lectical synapse or gap junction. So synapse is a junction or gap between two neurons. And lectical synapse is a specialized connection between two neurons that allow for the different flow of ions from one neuron to the other. So lectical synapse is a gap between two neurons. In the next, we will study its structure. This one is vesicles containing neurotransmitter. It means the messages are called as neurotransmitters. So presynaptic membrane and then postsynaptic membrane. It means the sensory neuron, the message will move in this direction. So it will move in this direction, the axon of the sensory neuron, and this gap is called as synaptic cleft, and postsynaptic membrane, which will receive the messages in the form of neurotransmitters from the axon of the sensory neuron, and the message is sent towards the motor neuron. So in this way, neurotransmitters receptor muscles. So they will have the complementary shapes of these neurotransmitters. So these are the different parts of the which are used in the transfer of neurotransmitters from one axon towards the other axon. Now you can see axon terminal of one neuron and the gap synaptic cleft and dendrite of the second neuron. You can see over there. Now the messages are in the form of vesicles. So these are the vesicles which have neurotransmitters in them. So these neurotransmitters attach themselves with the wall of the membrane of the axon terminal. So they are released through this membrane by exocytosis. By the process of exocytosis, they are released into the gap synaptic cleft, and then they attach on the postsynaptic membrane, which have receptors to receive these neurotransmitters. So these receptors have the complementary shapes of for these neurotransmitters. So in this way, they are transferred from one neuron towards the other neuron. So in this way, the messages are sent towards the one neuron towards the other neuron. An electrical impulse travels down the axon of a neuron and then triggers the release of tiny vesicles containing neurotransmitters. These vesicles will then bind to the membrane of the presynaptic cell, releasing the neurotransmitters into the synapse. So these chemical messages cross the synaptic cleft and connect with receptor sites in the next nerve cell, triggering an electrical impulse known as the action potential. So in this way, students, it was all about the first part of the coordination and control. Thanks for watching my video. Please like, subscribe this channel. Thank you so much.